Chapter 4. The tractite city was even more beautiful from directly above. The buildings were like misted glass eggs, illuminated from within, and there were amorphous coloured forms inside the walls, like embryos with green and amber and blood-coloured flesh. The paths between the buildings glittered, showing tiny fragments of colours: pale blue, lavender, silver and gold. 4 tractites drifted below, standing in a bright green field in what must be artificial light, throwing a small glittering object between them. Every time one of them caught it, it chimed. Even the mist seemed beautified by the city, transformed into a slightly coloured haze. Gauzy clouds formed around the lights as they approached, dissipated as they passed by. Sam heard the doctor's voice, talking to the tractites, the faint snorts and whinnies of their responses. She focused on the conversation, realised that the doctor was talking to Naranil about spaceships. The tractite was sounding puzzled. Every type of ship the doctor mentioned seemed to be something she hadn't heard of. Sam was sure that the doctor was nosing around for information, and equally sure that what he was trying to find out didn't have anything directly to do with hyperspace or warp drives. Well, she would work it out. And one thing was sure, she wasn't going to ask, not unless she absolutely had to. Cold, damp air hit Sam in the face as the force field around the skimmer was powered down. They had landed. The city looked less ethereal, now that she was on a level with it. Bubbles had become domes, some of them several stories high. Paths had become streets, lamps had become brilliant streetlights. Tractites were clopping about in the white glare of the lights, their breath pluming in the air, and there was a bustle of carts being loaded and unloaded, of coloured fabric rolls and wicker baskets, and food bubbling in metal pots. Despite the cold, the air smelled like a summer garden, sweet grass and soil and flowers. Kittig had parked the skimmer in the middle of a large circular intersection. Several paths looped around them, and there were even flyovers, though they could hardly be further from the concrete monstrosities of human make. They looked as if someone had thrown an arc of water through the air and frozen it to pastel-coloured, glinting ice. Connections flowed from the bridges to the ground and into adjacent buildings. As they followed a path towards one of the bridges, Sam noticed that there were flowers growing from nearby beds of soil around the supporting pillars. They looked as if they were cast from wax in the pale light, but when she knelt to touch them, they were soft, real flowers, and unmistakably terrestrial. Daffodils. Looking around, she saw winter jasmine, wallflowers, crocuses. But there were subtle oddities about them. The crocuses came in bright red, as well as the usual purple and yellow, and almost all of the daffodils were pure white. Sam stopped, took a closer look. Surely they were daffodils? Everything else was right. The shape of the flowers and of the leaves, the length and colour of the stalks. I see you've noticed too. Sam jumped. The doctor was crouching beside her, his breath frosting in the air. Sam nearly said, "Noticed what?" but stopped herself just in time. The doctor gently touched the petals of the flowers. Almost the same. And everything else is so different. It's as if there's some fundamental instability. He stood up. Never mind. Even simplicity itself is never as simple as it seems. He started after Naranil and Kittig on a curving path that led under the bridge and into a small, bright street lined with beds of the white daffodils. Sam followed him. 2 huge tractites cantered past her on the path and began ascending the gentle incline of the bridge. Sam felt their eyes on her, but tried to ignore the feeling. It was too much to expect that these people wouldn't be curious. There didn't seem to be many other aliens around. Sam realised what she had been thinking and stopped suddenly, staring at the flower-lined street in front of her. Aliens. And this is Earth. These are daffodils. And I'm an alien. Sam frowned, then remembered something about the doctor's conversation with Naranil on the skimmer. He had mentioned the Braw coasts on Tractis. True, he had pretended to be confused and absent-minded, but Sam was pretty sure that he had been faking that. So presumably the Braw coast was a real place and very well known, and Naranil hadn't heard of it. So either she'd been lying about having visited Tractis, which seemed pointless, or the Tractis she knew wasn't the same as the Tractis the Doctor knew. Just like this Earth isn't the same as the Earth I come from. Different flowers, a different intelligent species. She tried to remember what the Doctor had told her about the nature of time, and quickly realized that it wasn't much. She'd always had the impression that time was relatively constant, that the TARDIS was a sort of shuttlecraft moving from one century to another, or one planet to another, using pretty much the same mechanism for both sorts of transition. Yes, they could make small changes, like saving a child's life. But what if they could make larger changes? Changing the outcome of a major war, for instance. Yes, that was it. She felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Earth hadn't been invaded at all. "Doctor, I've got it!" she shouted, racing along the street after him. The Doctor turned from where he was walking between the two cart-horse-sized tractites. "We're in an alternative universe." The Doctor frowned and shook his head, glanced at Naranil and muttered something. Then he walked back to Sam and grabbed her by the arms. "Sam, Sam, Sam, Sam," he said, speaking in a low voice. "Do please be careful what you say. Yes, we are in an alternative universe, but the trouble is it's inherently unstable for a reason I haven't yet understood. And if it collapses, it won't just disappear. It's far too big for that. It will create a rift in the vortex so huge that the whole fabric of reality will collapse." Sam opened her mouth to object, but the Doctor wasn't stopping. "And before you ask, no, we can't just go away and pretend it isn't happening. I have to fix this, and the only way of doing that is if I can somehow find out when things changed and how, and change them back. But given how far back that's likely to be, and how much is likely to have changed, there may well be nothing I can do, and even if we do try anything, our kind hosts will probably try to defend their own existence, which means stopping us from doing it, perhaps by killing us. So it really would be a good idea if you didn't tell them about it in advance, because if I can't fix it, then neither you nor I will ever meet another living human being again, and we and the Tractites and everything else will probably cease to exist by about next Tuesday. Now, do you understand how serious this situation is?" Sam hesitated. Then she looked the Doctor in the eye and said, 8.5? The Doctor jumped back as if she had hit him. "What?" Sam broke away from him and hurried along the street after Kittig and Naranil. She wanted to explain about the Jones-Richter scale, but she was trying to hold in a fit of giggles. She knew the situation was serious, but then it always was, and she was sure the Doctor was overreacting. This place was so peaceful, so good. It might not be the world they'd left behind, but it could hardly be a threat to the existence of everything. And anyway, Sam didn't like being told off for no good reason. After a moment, the Doctor came up behind her and put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Sam." She finally had to let the giggles go. "And so you should be," she spluttered, "browbeating me like that. The Tractites are hardly Zygons, are they? Or those stupid Daleks you go on about?" The Doctor stared at her in amazement. "But I didn't know what you were going to say next. I had to make you realise." "Realise what?" "That we're stranded in a dodgy situation again." "Come on, Doctor. I can work that out for myself, can't I?" "Do you have to tell me everything?" I'm not stupid, you know." The doctor turned away without a word and began staring into one of the buildings. The window showed that it was full of water inside, blue water with bright corals and thousands of small, brilliantly coloured fish. Sam stepped towards it, saw the doctor's face reflected in the dark water. It seemed disembodied, timeless. No, not timeless. Old. Sam remembered his jokes about the centuries, his 900-year diary, and realized that it wasn't all a joke. Not always. Inside the youthful energy, the brilliance, was someone who had seen perhaps too many things. "We all have to be Daleks sometimes," he muttered, looking down at his mud-caked shoes. "It's just a matter of knowing when you really don't have any choice." Before Sam could even begin to work out what this meant, he looked up again and smiled brilliantly at her, all traces of age and weariness gone. "Come on, there's a whole world to explore." Sam looked ahead and saw that Naranil and Kittig were standing under a glass archway that crossed the street, their heads on each other's shoulder, their arms entwined. Tractite love. Not just a world to explore, thought Sam. A universe. A whole other universe. Suddenly, something that the doctor had said while he was telling her off came back to her mind. Find out when things changed and how, and change them back. Which means that we have to change something in the past so that this universe ceases to exist. Oh. Sam closed her eyes. Suddenly, she couldn't look at the Tractite city, couldn't look at the Tractites who had welcomed them so kindly, so calmly, the Tractites who seemed so totally devoid of suspicion or malice. No wonder the doctor had been angry with her for telling them about the alternative universe. Effectively, she'd been telling them, "We're going to have to destroy you." She could only hope that they hadn't understood the implications. She made herself open her eyes, found herself looking at the aquarium. She remembered Naranil saying that this was only a small city, which meant that there were many more. She imagined them growing everywhere on Earth, illuminated in their soft colours like the fish in their tank. She imagined chucking a brick through the glass wall in front of her, all the water pouring out, all the bright fish stranded and flopping on the stone path, struggling, asphyxiating. Okay, dying. "We're going to have to kill the Tractites," she thought. "Me and the doctor. Kill all of them." She looked for the doctor, saw him with Kittig and Naranil talking. She opened her mouth to call him, but then thought better of it. Because he was right. There really wasn't anything you could say.